Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us on the Activate and Illuminate podcast with Mel. I'm your host, Mel. Together, we're going to be diving into some stories of ordinary people doing a little bit of extraordinary things. People who've maybe pushed their bodies, their mindsets, or maybe society's paradigms. So you're going to find yourself maybe wanting to laugh, cry, or even be inspired. We would invite you to share, like, and subscribe, to sign up for our newsletter as well on activateandilluminate.com. Now, just keep in mind that this information that you are going to hear is informational and educational for entertainment purposes only. This does not constitute professional advice of any kind. The views expressed are those of myself and guests only. Listeners are encouraged to seek professional and legal advice regarding their own situations. So, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time, and thanks again for being here. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. So if you have ever wanted to learn new ways of doing business, new ways of connecting online, you're going to want to listen to Steve Jamieson that I have here. He is the CEO of Pitch. That's PXCH. And he is going to tell us a little bit about how the world is changing, how we're going to be connecting online for business a little differently than maybe we have been in the past, and just what his company is about. And he has a vast experience of knowledge, and I'm going to let him tell us all about it in his story. So welcome, Steve.
Well, thank you. And hello to everybody. Glad I'm here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you are doing right now, what you're excited about, and then we'll go from there.
Well, let me put it in context for people is what most people don't realize, and that in the past 10 years, almost 2 billion individual people have been on a live webinar. A lot of that, obviously, because of COVID. But even after COVID, 550 million people still get on a live webinar every day, 100 millions more on a recording. But the very first webinar that was ever invented was back in 1995 by Xerox. You had a capacity of 1,000 people. They had chat and text and polls. So when I saw that, I realized that in 30 years, webinar technology has never changed. Unlike the phone, unlike the camera, unlike televisions, right? The biggest communication tool that we depended on back in 2020, 2021 has gone through no technology. All people can do is share a camera or share a website and then hope that the real connection happens afterwards, right? Whatever that call to action is. So I was the CEO of 3 different international sales and marketing companies for 25 years, where a lot of people use webinars to share the word. And Zoom had approached me about trying to get market share before going public. But I didn't grow up to be a Zoom reseller. I really wanted to create an experience. So we ended up creating a webinar platform that is completely interactive, meaning we can take virtually any website in the world for up to 600 people at the same time. And now people, after they're finished talking, they can purchase products, they can sign contracts, they can enroll in programs. Absolutely anything you can do on a website when you're not in a webinar, you can do when you're on a pitch platform. So we are the first company besides Zoom, Google Meets, and Microsoft Teams that decided to try to do something different, to move it forward to a next generation of interactivity, personal communication, because no longer is it good enough to I'm going to send you a text in the chat and then hope that you do something tomorrow. So not only can we be live and interactive for that many people and still give people their privacy, by the way, in a world where people are very concerned about that, no one else can see what you're doing. We can do it live. We can do it in a recording as well for those people that can't make it, because everyone is not available when you want them to be available. So you can still make a presentation and you can make a recording, and that recording is completely interactive as if you were there. The other thing we did is, what if you're speaking to somebody who doesn't speak your language? We live in a global world, even in our own communities, right? People speak so many different languages. Well, to touch of a button, they can hear you in the language of their choice. It could be Vietnamese, Korean, Hispanic, Thai, Greek, whatever that may be. They hear you in real time in your voice. So it's live and interactive, recorded and interactive, real-time voice translations. And the other thing we do, not for ego, because this sounds narcissistic, right? is you can make an AI twin of yourself. And not because we want someone to replace you, but it allows you to scale and duplicate. Because I know if you're like me, you make a recording and you send to somebody, you do it 25 times because you drool, you stutter, right? You're unpleased. But when you can just take a picture of yourself and turn that into a talking photo and write the perfect script and share an interactive website, now all of a sudden you can scale. You can actually have time to do something else other than, like I say, have your narcissistic moment by sharing yourselves. Our tagline is we've created an experience. And that experience is really up to you to decide to meet people where they're at. And so with technology changing so dramatically and impactfully, considering almost 500 million people get on a webinar every day, it was time to make that a better experience. And that's what we do.
Yeah, I would say people like this solves things people didn't even know were missing.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You know what it is? I think the best example is, I don't know if you remember when the Motorola flip phone, right, was the number one phone in the world. And everyone
Yeah.
loved it. It was their Star Trek moment, right? I've got this
Yeah.
cool flip phone, right? Then along comes this guy named Steve Jobs with something called a smartphone. And he tells people that now making a phone call is going to be like the least popular thing you do on your phone. You're going to check your emails. You're going to go on the internet, right? And they were like, why? I like my phone, right? I don't want my phone to necessarily to be my best camera. And then 3 years later, everyone understood what he was talking about. I think it's the same thing with webinars, right? Is we have a fixed thing in our mind since 1995 of what a webinar should be. Share a screen, talk to people. And I think very shortly, there'll be a moment where people won't remember that they couldn't touch the screen on a webinar. And how does that show up in people's lives? Let's say, for instance, you want to buy a house. You're in New York, the house is in Florida. You flew to Florida to go pick out the house. And now you're waiting to have to fly back to do the closing. What if you don't have to fly back to do the closing? What if now with online notaries in 34 states, you can do it from your webinar? So what about if you're insurance and you get that policy and you feel like you're all alone and unprotected, right? You're signing a legal document and it sounds very imposing. Well, what if you could do that with the customer service on and use DocuSign or eSign and have all your questions answered and share the screen? What if you're a public speaker and a teacher and you want to sell your books or promote a course? And right there in the moment, what if you're in a charity and you're making an emotional plea to somebody and you want all of these people to click the button and make a donation at the point when you've made the best presentation you can? So very few people in business, especially all of your listeners, are ever on a webinar where they don't want anyone to do anything, where the rest of it is, thank you, see you soon, right? So all we
Yeah.
do is, again, help meet people where they're at and make them more comfortable, whether that be in live, whether it be in a recorded, whether it be in another language. It's entirely up to you. So we're very excited because it is really hard in this world of technology where everything changes 20 minutes to find something where you're the only company in the world that can create that experience. And that's where we're at today. And that's why I'm here with you.
Wow, and I will say it truly is an honor, Steve, because it is when I think about the applications for this and where this is going to be down the road. At some point, I feel like I'm going to say, how blessed was I to have the CEO of Pitch On talking about this concept. I see it as being huge, absolutely huge. When you talk about all those applications, it just makes me think more and more. It makes me think about my accountant, how long it took him to get me to sign my taxes.
Right. Exactly. I mean, like I say, it doesn't always have to be a big home run. It might be having somebody sign up for your newsletter, right? Booking a Calendly meeting. It's the idea that everything in marketing always leads to the next meeting. And now you know what that will be. And that's what this software allows people to do is there is no small next step when you're in sales or marketing. I mean, Gary Vee, for those of you that follow him, says that live shopping, for instance, or community shopping, right? Not a transactional experience, but a community experience is the biggest invention since the internet itself. And if you're on Amazon, if you're on Shopify, if you're with an affiliate company, I'm saying you spend all of this money driving people to your website for hopefully 5 seconds, right, of their attention. Well, what if you were there when they arrived? What if your website was live and interactive with you to make it personal? What changed Google? What changed Amazon? It was other people's reviews. and opinions about products that became the most trusted source there is. And so anytime we can engage people and not replace people with technology, to me, that's the kind of technology and innovation that I want to be involved in. So this isn't about somebody losing their job. This isn't about removing you from the picture so you have more free time to do something other. No, this is putting you in front of the most important people, your friends, your family, your customers, your coworkers, in a way that you can actually interact more seamlessly and easy. And that's why sometimes something that is as simple as that, the number one question I always get from people is, why doesn't Zoom do this? Why doesn't Google Meet do this? It seems so obvious. You know why? Because it costs a lot more money to do. When we have 600 people on, we actually open up 600 micro websites to give people that privacy and interactivity. So you can think of it as 600 times the cost to the company, not 600 times to the customer. I want to get them scared, but 600 times to the company. And so all these companies that are so big, they're all publicly traded. They're driven by their profit and loss, no longer driven by the customer experience. And so that's why I'm never worried about competing against the big guys, because they don't put the customer first. And that's always my competitive advantage is I can create and innovate quickly, and I know what my priorities are compared to theirs.
This episode brought to you by protandemcanada.lifevantage.com. What if you could turn on your body to work like it was supposed to? What if you could have it remember how to handle toxins, stress, and the environment like it used to when you were young? What if it worked for your pets too? What if this is not about supplementing something that is missing, but activating something that has gone dormant? About actually turning on your body to make these things again. Learn how to activate your body now. Check us out, protandemcanada.lifevantage.com.
Tell us a little bit about your background and what you did before this, and tell us about where you came from.
So it seems like whenever I tell this, and then I seem like I'm older than I realize, right? Think of all the things and transitions that I had, right? So I started out in Los Angeles as an actor. Yes, you can watch old films of mine, and I always say to people, if I was a really good actor, I'd probably still be one. So maybe I'll just let it lie right there, right? And then I became a talent agent at the largest talent agency in the world, representing other actors and actresses, because I thought it was equally enjoyable, right, to help everyone else's dream come true, as opposed to only focusing on yourself. And then I started to manage their production companies. So all of a sudden, I went from an artist to this business guy running production companies and running businesses for all these actors and actresses. And I just thought, if I'm going to be in business, I'd rather be in business for myself than be in business for them. But I thought, if I'm going to show up in the entrepreneurial world, I have to show up with what makes me different, not trying to be similar. And it was the creativity. It was the innovation. It was wanting to do things differently. It was wanting to impact people's lives. That was my flagship. So no one hired me to increase their profits and loss. They hired me to create profits to have. And so that's, no matter what my playing field has been, I always bring the same game to each playing field, which is innovation, creativity, and compassion for changing people's lives.
What do you think makes a successful entrepreneur in today's world?
You have to really care. And you'd be surprised what a rare commodity that is, because, when you deal with so many different vendors in the world, and all they care about is a transactional experience. And so for me, part of my passion is not just inventing the product, but sharing it with all the people that use it. And that's why we created an affiliate program, because Zoom doesn't pay customers for telling people about how great their product is. Google Meets doesn't do that. Microsoft Teams does it. So the idea that I created a business side of it with the product that allows people who are so excited about sharing it. So that's why I look at it. It's like a Google review, and then except Google doesn't pay you for the review. You get a little honor and recognition maybe with your name on their website, but you don't share in their profits. You don't share in the benefits that you're helping other people. We track every good review in a sense, and we share the wealth with you. We share it every time you refer us a customer. We share every single month that they pay the customer. And that way our customers become emotionally invested in our shared success. So it's not about them making us successful. It's about what can we do to make them successful for being a part of the same passion that we have for the innovation and technology. And so you never have to buy our products in order to tell somebody else about it and get a reward. There is no bait and switch in this perspective. But literally, if you're on a webinar and you see this experience and you go, my cousin Shirley loved this. Not only are we going to ask you to tell your cousin Shirley, but we're actually going to pay you for as long as Shirley pays us for doing it. And so to me, it's like you say, how do we touch people's lives? How do we activate them? How do we illuminate them? How do we do that? We make them a part of the entire process. They're not just the end game for us, for people to be customers. They're a part of the family in that sense. And so we're vested in them having a great experience because that is our entire go-to-market strategy. There's no Facebook ads. There's no Instagram ads. There's no Google search paid ads. We depend on people having an incredible experience and wanting to tell somebody else. And we don't ask them to pay us for the right to tell the word. We actually do that. So that was the philosophy. How do we take what I thought was the most powerful marketing tool, which is people's great experiences, and literally not just say thank you, but share in the success?
Brilliant. Brilliant. Because, see, I see this business as being an addendum to other things. So, for example, no matter what kind of business you're doing, this is going to be a tool that helps you do it a little bit better. And people are going to share it while they're talking about their business. They're going to share it in conjunction with their So really, in a sense, it's not competing with anything.
No, most of our people do not market our product as a business. They're on a webinar promoting their primary business,
Yeah.
whatever that may be. And then at some point in the presentation, when you make the screen interactive and somebody touches the screen, they always go, no matter what you're selling, they go, stop a second. They go, oh my God, what technology is this? I've never been able to touch a screen in a Zoom before or Google Meet. And that's how they market it. They literally just say to people, well, I found this for my business and you can use this for your business, right? As well. Here's a link, go sign up. That's the organic, natural growth coming from passion versus dollars and cents, And so when you could create that organic, powerful go-to-market strategy, then you're 100% dependent on people liking your product. That's our strategy.
Do you think entrepreneurs are born or made?
I think it's a combination of both, right? And I know that from every vertical I've been in. When I was a talent agent, the most talented people are not the ones who made it. It was the ones who had that combination, right, of talent and common sense and business savvy and work ethic. I always thought the great example was George Clooney was in my acting class when I was an actor. And
Okay.
I could tell you that with all honesty, he wasn't better than anybody else, but he was better at working the business. He was certainly good and congratulations to his career, but there were people that were far more talented in that class, better looking. I always say the one thing I learned in life, whether it be sports or entertainment or business, there's always somebody better looking. There's always somebody with a better personality, right? There's always somebody with more money than you, right? There is no end when you're at the top, right? And so our goal, we always think we have to be the best in order to be successful. And you don't have to be the best. You just have to be good enough. So when the opportunity presents itself, one, be smart enough to recognize it. I always say this about relationships. People go, I searched my whole life. I never met the love of my life. You did. You just didn't recognize it. They came and they left. They may have been sitting right in the coffee shop right there with you, and you weren't ready to see it. It's the same thing in business. I wasn't looking to invent a webinar. I didn't wake up one morning and go, if I could only invent a webinar, I'm going to be fulfilled. It was recognizing the opportunity when it presented, as opposed to what my vision for success was. It was recognizing that things come into your life and notice them, maximize them. And the other thing I would say to anyone who's an entrepreneur, and I always say this, whether it be about love or business, is relationships are everything. I've made far more money and far more satisfying about the people that I work with than any idea that I ever had. And so once again, it's not the best ideas that make it to the market. That combination of great idea and working with great people, I'm saying that will take you much further in that sense. So value and realize that your relationships is where your real wealth is. And it's not necessarily the person who's the richest that's the best relationship in your life, or the person who's the smartest, or the person who's the most successful. It has to be unique to you and unique to your ideas. And so I always say, when I was developing products my whole life, I used to say that, my developers were always 50-year-old white guys. That was my joke, right? And then I found like all these young kids, that were 25 years old and full of enthusiasm. And at one point I thought, you know what? I'm going to help these kids. I'm going to have my 50-year-old white guys train my 25-year-old kids, right? And I realized my 25-year-old guys who graduated college, they knew the latest codes, the latest technologies, the latest ideas. And they ended up teaching the 50-year-old white guys what they should be learning, right? And so that's what I mean about being open to what constantly comes in front of you. If somebody said to me, that's the secret of success, that is really paying attention to what comes in front of you, leveraging those moments, coming it with good intention. If you think about what's in it for you, it'll never come. If you think about the impact you can have on other people, more things can come in your directions than you can handle.
Wise words right there. Tell us, what would you say your personal mission is, Steve?
I'm very day to day in the moment, right? So I don't think about, what's my legacy going to be, right? Or I don't dwell on the past, whether it be the good or the bad, right? I'm somebody that certainly wants to build shared memories in my life because memories allow those moments to last forever. But in reality, I take it a day at a time, and project at a time and person at a time. And I'm not going to say it's because I don't really think this way, but at the end of the day, I'd like to feel, was I my best version of myself today? For other people, did I show up in the world the way they wanted to? And I know there's days I don't. And those are the things that linger with me sometimes when I just go, you know what? Like I remember the other day, and there was a homeless woman who passed me by, who asked me for money. And I remember I was rude. I was rude. I wasn't in a place. And I tracked her down because within 15 minutes, I felt so guilty, right? That I could be so self-centered for that moment that she hit me, right? And I needed to find her, not for her. I needed to find it for me. And so I certainly don't live up to that expectation of myself all the time, but I try.
How do you think that technology is changing in the next little
You know,
while?
I just read a speech by John F. Kennedy in 1962 at Rice University, and he talked about technology. It was the day that he introduced the concept of we're going to land a man on the moon one day. We're going to the moon,
Okay.
which was considered, right, an impossible feat. And he did it, right, 7 years later, even though he wasn't here for it. And what he talked about was the fear of technology replacing people's jobs. Back then, he talked about that. He talked about the responsibility of technology being used for good versus evil, using the nuclear bomb as an example of man will always have a choice on how technology shows up in our lives. And I think we're at that moment again with AI. I think AI is the nuclear technology of today, and the sense of it will it destroy society or will it build a new society? Right? We haven't answered the question in nuclear technology today yet, right? Whether it can create unlimited energy in the world or destroy the world. And I think everyone is going through that same question with AI. Is it going to threaten our life or build it? The truth is, the answer is up to us. It's not up to the technology. It's up to the character inside us. And I think that's a question, right? Of is society ready for that enormous power? And so what he said in that speech was technology is not supposed to replace man's capabilities to achieve greatness. It's supposed to enable it. And I think that's what's going on right now in this moment at a faster rate, an exponentially faster rate than any other technology that's come upon us. When you think how new AI is when it just touched the market, 24 to 36 months ago at the public level, and how the impact it's exponentially having on every single business and every single person in our lives. I hope I'm saying that the promise of technology that man will be up to the capabilities to handle it responsibly.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Hey, I see in some instances it's disconnecting people more, and in some instances it's connecting more. In my family, my daughter and son-in-law, they just got approved for a place, and the only reason their offer got accepted is because they had ChatGPT write a letter to the seller, right?
Okay.
They wanted ChatGPT's version of, who we are, what we're looking to do in our life, and ChatGPT did a great job, and the other people had actually even offered more, and they came back and said, "No, we're gonna go with this because we just feel you."
Yeah.
Right.
The closest equivalent to that, right, was I remember, when my son was in school and I remember he came home and he said he was allowed to use a calculator for his math tests instead of having to learn the math to answer the math questions, right? It was the first
Yeah,
version of technology that made no sense to me. So you're going to say
yes,
you're not going to learn the things that a calculator can do so you could do other things. I didn't understand it then. I don't understand it today. So the idea that, like you say, how many school term papers now are written by ChatGPT and kids are figuring out how to rewrite it, right? So the
yeah,
teachers don't know it because there's softwares that can detect that GPT wrote, right? It's almost like locks and keys, right? As I always say, the locks are for keep the innocent people out. It never keeps the crooks out, right? They know how
yeah,
to get through a lock. It's the innocent people that are going, oh my God, I lost my keys today. I can't get in my house. Crook goes,
yeah.
oh, no problem. Give me 5 minutes. Just look the other way. Be right in 2 seconds. Right? So again, I think technology is always will be the blessing and the curse. Originally, my mantra was, technology is good when it's cheaper, better, and faster of whatever you're currently doing. And now technology is so sophisticated, those three things are no longer the limitation.
Do you see pitch being able to connect people more online?
If somebody said to me, what's your ultimate goal for pitch? It's not the next feature, right?
Yeah.
I look at it as could become the single most powerful communication platform in the world eventually. I think it's in some ways of why Elon Musk bought Twitter, because he realized with all of his inventions and all of his technologies, communication is still the most powerful one, right? Whether
Mhm.
you look at the social media channels now or what Elon has done. And so I love being in that arena in the sense that communication is still the mother of all inventions. And I think that we have a capability, of constantly creating this and going in places that I would never expect. I would say to you that if you said if Steve Jobs was here today and he never envisioned where the iPhone would eventually become for people, right?
Mhm.
And so I hope it's the same thing here, that other people will take the concept of real-time interpersonal communications as technology advances in ways that I never could have imagined. But eventually will a pitch webinar be not just interactive, but will be a virtual experience? Will it be like you're stepping into somebody else's living room versus watching somebody else's living room? I have no doubt. I have no doubt that the term interactivity, I mean, we're all going to be like, an instant hologram, right? In that sense. And it's exciting because where things you say would normally happen in 20 or 30 years from now can happen in 20 or 30 months of where this
Yeah.
can go. And that's what I like is to have a platform that can be at the hub, of what some of those innovation changes are. I didn't invent the next AI product. I use AI technology to make the product better. And if you notice, there's not a new webinar platform coming out every 20 minutes. There is a new AI company coming out. And so I think as long as we stay focused on creating a better experience for people to communicate, we'll stay focused on the kind of technology that will show up in people's lives in this area.
So, with things shifting so fast, how do you think entrepreneurs should adapt?
It's a lot of work. You know, I remember once when I was at a seminar and the internet was first becoming popular, and there were so many CEOs that spent more time on the golf course than learning the power of the internet because they thought, I'm just going to hire people. It's easier for me to hire people with that expertise than actually learn it. And I think it's the same thing now. It's my job is not to be dependent on who I hire. The information is there for me to then hire the right people to take my vision. So I think it's very easy to go, you know, uh, y- you know, how do I relate to a 25-year-old? Like I remember the first time that I did a demonstration on the pitch platform. I did this for Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies, CTOs, right? Harvard MBAs. I was never intimidated by presenting my platform to them. But the first time I presented it to a 25-year-old, marketing agency whiz kid, I was sweating, right? Because I just thought he'd go, look, maybe you should make this presentation to my dad instead of me, right? And this is your social media platform, webinars, right? But I remember when I said to him, so let me ask you this. I said, so you promote your products on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, right? And you're great at creating audiences, huge crowds. You could do that in your sleep. He goes, yeah. I said, but your conversion ratios are less than 1%, right? He goes, yeah. I said, well, what if you could put a join my VIP room, meet the creator, meet the influencer right now, and then bring them into a pitch presentation. So we're like your fourth social media platform in real time, where your conversion ratios will be 70%. All of a sudden, I was the Richard Branson, right, to a 25-year-old, right? I was the cool
Yeah.
guy who understood them, right? And so that's what I meant is when you can invent something that's so universal, it is not demographic central, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
only advantage that we have is because of COVID, there was 300 million people a day force trained, force fed on how to do a Zoom, right? For
Yeah.
Google Meets.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't really matter who you are. You've hosted a Zoom one time in your life, right? And so the leap in order to learn our technology is a lot smaller than it is for a new technology. So if I was in the business of convincing people who don't use webinars to use webinars, that's a harder sell, right? That's what Steve Jobs had to do. He had to convince people to use a technology that people weren't using. I've got 500,000,000 people a day on a webinar. I just have to show them that ours is a better experience. And I think I will attract another 500,000,000 who aren't using webinars, whom will use it now because our experience is so different than what they're used to, which is, most people get on a webinar, they turn the camera off, they multitask on the poor speaker, and the speaker
Yeah.
hopes 5 days later that he got some results, right?
Yeah.
We've changed that whole dynamic.
Which feature do you like best?
Every time I do a demo, and someone touches the screen, I literally 90% of the time hear the exact same three letters. OMG. You're kidding
Yeah.
me. Every time. And regardless of who they are. So that will always be my moment, my oh my God moment of when they can touch the screen. I think creating the avatars I have fun with, right? Because I can take famous people and since I could have William Shatner invite you to my webinar. I'm not promoting it or pretending that they're passionate about pitch, but just a sense of humor, right? Grabbing an attention,
Yeah.
to say, by the way, Steve's doing a webinar at 8 o'clock at night. And he asked me to invite you right now. I'm saying, so the creativity and the fun of creating of these 30-second or 1 minute avatars for invites, I think are great. Cause it allows me to dip into my creativity. So I've done everyone from Tom Cruise, to, you name it, just for fun, not pretending
Yeah.
that they're really there, always make an acknowledgement that they're an AI twin and we're just having some fun.
Do you think that we are heading towards more micro communities instead of mass audiences?
Yeah, I think when, as individuals, right, I always say we never change, right? And if you look at all of us, we probably have at most three best friends, right? At most. And we
Yeah.
have maybe a dozen good friends, right? And sometimes the inner circle of the three may change, right? Depending on what's going on in your life.
Yeah.
I think that's where social media is a false sense of friends. And it's a false sense of interpersonal communications. For instance, like we've been talking now, right, for whatever it may be, 15, 30 minutes, and we're really talking. We're not texting
Yeah.
each other. We're not sharing videos with each other. We're really communicating. It really feels like we're at the same kitchen table in that
Yeah.
perspective, right? That's not a false sense of communication, right? It's a different sense of communication, but it is like, I remember I'll refer to my son again. I'd say sometimes, you need to call somebody and he would text them. And I would say to him, a text is not the same as a phone call. You're not going to get the same results. You're not going to build a relationship. You're not going to get to move them. I said, when you have an issue, because you think you know them by text. When you need a favor, if you've only texted with somebody, you're not going to move the needle. But I think you can build a relationship that's very close with someone here. Not to replace being together, but sometimes it's just physically not possible, to do it. And so I think we are redefining what a personal relationship is and helping people to maintain it. It's like, I used to come home every night and my mother would be speaking to the same people on the phone for an hour. I'm saying, so every generation finds their communication tool with that inner circle. So when somebody says, I have 5,000 friends on Facebook, I say that could have been the worst branding ever. They're not friends.
No.
It's the biggest disservice to branding there is. There's
Hmm.
5,000 people that I would call them contacts. I call them people that are aware of you, right? But they're people
Stalkers.
that won't remember you tomorrow. Right. That's what I meant. They're not showing up on your last day, here on
No.
earth to go, oh yeah, I really miss you. I miss your social media posting, right? You're forgotten in 30 seconds, right?
Hmm.
But those people that when you need somebody who there are just a handful of people that no matter what happens in life, they're going to show up in your life when you need them the most.
Hmm.
And that happens through real communication. And I think we're the second best version, of this. And we'll always be second best. We're never going to try to be better than real, but
Yeah.
it is the second best that I'm aware of today.
What mindset shifts do you think people need to make in order to thrive better in this time that we're coming into? We've just come out of this. I feel like what's happened in the last 5 or 6 years is even the most extroverted have at different times turtled and gone inwards, and people's environments got so small around them for a while. So how do you see what we've gone through over the last 5 or 6 years as really playing a part in the mindset of what we're coming up to?
I think there's been two very powerful fears in life that hold people back that people can relate to, right? They said that fear of public speaking is one of the most powerful emotions there are. I think the second one is fear of technology.
Hmm.
And so that's what I meant is that 25-year-old really isn't that smart. You know, the technology is not an IKEA furniture moment, right? Where you walk into the
Yeah.
showroom, it's a very cheap price and it looks beautiful. You buy it, you bring it
Yeah.
home, and it sits in the box in the living room because no one wants to put it together, right? That's to me is the equivalent of like technology day to day, right? You're not going to read those instructions, right? You end up returning it if you can't
Yeah.
get your 25-year-old to put it together for you. And I think it's technology. Every time I do a presentation, no matter how impressive the features may be or the impact on their lives that they clearly agree with, they're always afraid they can't do it. And
Mhm.
so I think that affects us in life about everything. I always say that when you're afraid, you're alive, whatever that may be, right? When you go to, that's what I loved about sports. That's what I loved about entertainment is I would go to work and I would be nervous.
Mhm.
I would be nervous. Like when you're in sports, everyone is just waiting for you to make a mistake, right? And that's a pressure that the person who's working in a cubicle from 9 to 5 in customer service isn't necessarily feeling, right? And so therefore we look for that adrenaline rush outside of life. Unfortunately, some people look for drugs, some people do drinking, some people do it reckless relationships, right? Because everyone wants to feel alive. And some people pay it, which is not me, for a thrill ride to scare them, right? They go to an amusement park to scare themselves, right? They pay somebody to scare them. I mean, Halloween, right? It's saying so you can do things two ways, right? You can have that nervousness and adrenaline through love or through fear, right? And the problem with love is real love is not an adrenaline rush. Real love is over time, right? And so that adrenaline fades, right? But fear is always brand new.
Mhm.
And to do that. So I think in technology or in life, it's good actually to be a little bit afraid of what you're doing next because now you're reaching out of your comfort zone. Doesn't have to be huge, right? Doesn't have to be
Mhm.
enough to paralyze you, but enough to be a little nervous. Call it fear, call it nervousness. I'm saying that's when you're doing something and pushing yourself beyond. And so you'd be surprised. I'm saying as something simple as people will say to me, I know how to use Zoom. I don't want to change. I'm afraid to change. And so what I always say to people as an analogy is if you drove a horse to work and your office was 5 minutes away and somebody invents a car, you're not going to see the dramatic impact, right? I like my horse. It takes me 5 minutes. But if your job changes and now you have to go an hour away, now that invention of the car has a completely different new meaning. And now you are willing to get a driver's license. You are willing to learn all those things, right? Because it has an impact on your life. And so sometimes we say no very quickly without considering the impact it'll have on our life or our business because we're uncomfortable, we're afraid, we're a little nervous. We don't want to get on a webinar tomorrow and not know where the share button is, right? That to us is the panic mode, right? From that perspective. And
Yeah.
as what I've learned in life, right, is that's where, why athletes are so good is they'll practice themselves to death where they're not afraid anymore. So you go, how do these high profile athletes show up on a Sunday football field in front of 50,000 people and get through that? Right? And 30 million people on TV watching. It's because they practice so much that they no longer have to think about what to do. They just have to react to doing it. And the same thing in technology and the same things on very small scale. Yes, you may have to practice a new webinar a couple of times just so you're comfortable and not afraid. But I promise you, the results, the experience is so dramatically different in that sense.
What is something that scares you personally?
That I don't have enough time to do everything I want to do. I would say that I'm not, afraid of it as much as I am. Sometimes I just wish, oh my God, if I was 25 again, what could I accomplish? Not because I was better at 25, but just that I would have more time.
And one question that's been burning in my head here is what kind of mistakes have you made with this company in the past? What would you have said would have been your biggest mistake and why? And maybe it didn't turn out to be a mistake, but tell us about it.
Trying to do too much too soon. My vision for what I wanted to do was bigger than the practicality for my development team to build it
Mhm.
and for my customers to absorb it. And so I think because I got so excited that we came up with something that no one else in the world would do or can do today. And I always said to my team, I don't know how long we're going to be able to say that, right?
Mhm.
Just like, there was a time when Apple could do things on their phone that Google couldn't, right? So that day is no longer here. There's not one feature that Apple has that Google have, right? In that perspective. And so I had to learn to slow down to speed up for the sake of my customers and for the sake of my development team and for my own sanity, right? Trying to take on everything at once and staying focused.
Well, you are a fascinating guy, Steve. I'm loving this conversation. I want to share with people how to find you. Now, you can find Pitch at my pitch, which is pxch.com/activate. And we're going to have some contacts and stuff and company information in the show notes. But is there anything else that you can share with us or that you've been thinking about sharing with us on your time here today, Steve?
The only thing I've said on every podcast and that I meant is I always, again, offer my phone number and my emails. And
Perfect.
feel free for people to reach out to me and not even ask me about pitch, right? Ask me about something that you're working on. Ask me something, after owning my own companies for 25, 30 years and then becoming a consultant, for many years after that, it was almost like the difference between being an actor and an agent. Being a consultant was great because I was able to touch so many companies versus just my own or my own customers. And so this is not trying to get a consultant job. I don't want to be paid. I'm saying for giving people advice. But if I can make a difference by answering a question, that would be very rewarding to me about, again, something in your life, not something about my life would be great.
That is like just that there alone that you're willing to give your personal email and phone number, that speaks volumes to the kind of person that you are. I have one question that I haven't asked yet. How it affects me personally is do you have any applications coming up for the podcast world?
It's one of those things that what I do is when somebody says that to me, the first thing I think of is I've got to study the podcast world to know how I can make a difference.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'd say is I don't know the podcast world. I think it's fascinating. I think it's the most underreported story in communications, right? The numbers, the growth. I mean, Joe Rogan obviously has put it on the map of how powerful it can be in changing
Mhm.
the world. But I don't know yet enough about the technology to say what would my version be of it. But you've certainly helped put it on my radar screen to do that. But I certainly think if I was doing, like, my initial reaction was, if let's say I'm on the Joe Rogan show and he could have 600 or 1,000 people a day almost be in the studio with him. What's that VIP ticket worth to a podcaster? So how do you take this podcast and make it interactive? So if their guests are promoting a book, are promoting a service, a technology, that why can't they immediately touch the screen and come in and out of that podcast and meet people? So again, it's the same philosophy: is how do I create a more interactive podcast experience would be where I would start. Versus, I feel like right now, in a sense, we're on a Zoom, right?
Yeah.
We're limited.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
guests are limited
Yeah.
to be able to know more, get more, and experience more. And so if Joe Rogan had an interactive podcast, how valuable would that seat be? Right? It's kind of like when you go to a concert and you get to be backstage. That's the way I look at our technology, is you can create a backstage experience to a podcast when your audience is at a certain size that I think would become intoxicating to people.
Well, I will endeavor to be intoxicating. Well, Steve, I so appreciate your time today. I have loved just how authentic you are, first of all. A while ago, I heard that authenticity is the highest vibration. It's not love. It's not that authentic vibe is the highest frequency that you can have. And I have to say that I really felt that with you. And I really think that our listeners will as well. And I just so appreciate this conversation.
Thank you for inviting me. This was a great experience. It took me 1 second to say yes when you asked me to come, right? I had no questions.
Yeah.
I had no prerequisites. I didn't ask anything other than, when do you need me?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that was the right decision. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for your time.
Okay.